Are you ready to become awesomer? Hello, everyone. My name is Umar Hamid. I'm your host on the No Limit Selling podcast, where industry leaders share their tips, strategy, and advice on how you can become better, stronger, faster. Just before we get started, I've got a question for you. Do you have a negative voice inside your head? We all do, right? I'm going to help you remove that voice in under 30 days guaranteed. Not only remove it, but transform it. So instead of the voice that sabotages you, there's one that propels you to much higher levels of performance and success. There's a link in the show notes. Click on it to find out more. All right, let's get started. Hello, everyone. Today I have the pleasure of having Marc Mawhinney. Did I get it right?
You got her. Good job.
Brilliant. And so you run an organization called Natural Born Coaches. When I first read it, I thought it was that movie, Natural Born Killers, but no, coaches. Welcome to the program.
Yeah, thank you. Well, it's a funny story. It's funny you mentioned Oliver Stone's movie there, because when I was deciding on the name for my business and my podcast and stuff, I wanted my keyword coach, coaching, coaches in there because that's who I service. So what I decided to do was, to make a long story short, I ended up grabbing the top. First of all, music, like songs for the last 20 years before this. Nice. This is 2014. And I was inserting those keywords into song titles and band names. So I would insert, for example, thank God I didn't go with this. It was New Coaches on the Block was one of them that I had. I owned the domain. Yeah, I've let go of the domain, so feel free to rush over and grab it. Maybe it's still available. But nothing worked for music. So that 10 minutes ago to GoDaddy. Nothing worked for music and band and stuff. So I went to movies, started in 2014 and went down to all the top, 100 movies of every year. Nothing was working. I get back down to, 1994 or whenever that movie was released, Natural Born Coaches. I'm like, oh, wait. So then I end up doing what's the most nerve-wracking 20 seconds of any entrepreneur's life is when he goes to GoDaddy or whichever host, punches his in and says, oh, God, please be open and available.
Fingers, yeah.
Luckily it was. I grabbed it, and that's the story how I came up with the name for the business.
Brilliant. So everybody that I know is a coach at some form. They coach with their kids, maybe not effective coaches, but they're coaches. And some people opt to do this for a living, and it seems like such a noble calling. I'm going to help people do better in their lives. And then they sit there for the internet to ring or the phone to ring, and they starve. And you help them not do that. So tell me about a particular person that came to you that was struggling and how you helped them get to the other side where they're actually running a business and, more importantly, helping a lot more people.
I could take that tagline. I help coaches not starve. I like it. It just gets down to the, not.
Do you want to go to GoDaddy?
Yeah. I often say you can't coach on an empty stomach. So I think you make a really good point. If you've got bill collectors calling and stuff like that, you're not going to be in the best frame of mind to help a client. So, the coaches I've helped have gone anywhere. They've been aspiring coaches, just getting started. Sometimes during the first couple of years, they've had some clients, but not the traction that they want. Or sometimes it's someone that's been in it 5 years, 8 years, and wants a fresh start. They're maybe tired of their niche. They want to rejig things or whatever. There's one coach I know in particular, and I think this highlights an important point. When we started working together one-on-one, she had a 9-to-5 job. Now, a lot of people would say you got to burn the ships, right? And you got to go in March.
Burn the boats.
Tell your boss to go shove it. You got to do the Jerry Maguire thing when Tom Cruise rolled up his sleeves and said, took the goldfish and who's with me? And Renee Zellweger was the only one in the office that left with him. I'm not really a fan of that approach, because if you go in and tell your boss to shove it, all of a sudden you need to get a client tomorrow to eat or pay the bills. You're going to be taking on some people you don't want to work with, or it's not good. So
absolutely. And to add to that, you never know that past employer could be a great source of clients.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. So this client in particular, she kept her job for 6 months. And actually, it's funny you made that point, because they end up becoming a client of hers. Eventually, she went and did some workshops and some trainings and stuff like that too. But by doing that, she gave herself a runway for us to work together. She wasn't stressed out. She did very well. And then she's able to give notice in 6 months, move on. And I kind of did the same thing with my coaching business. So in a nutshell, I was in real estate for about a decade throughout my 20s, build up a really big real estate business. Everything was going great. I had 100 agents and employees. Nothing could go wrong. And then bang, 2009, everything collapsed.
Bang.
Yeah. And I went through a rough period of a couple of years where I was, trying to get back on my feet. I'm like, what the heck happened? Before everything I touched turned to gold. Now everything I touched turned to shit. So what I decided to do was actually get help from coaches and mentors. And so that's how I was really introduced to coaching. But when I started my coaching business in early 2014, I had a sales gig with a telecommunications company here in Canada. Great position. I worked from home. There was 2 of us in the whole province. Our manager was hours away, didn't bug us, super independent and flexible. Wasn't my passion, though. I knew it wasn't going to be my lifetime thing. But if I kept that position for
It
about
afforded you the ability to get the other business up and running.
It did, yeah. I kept it for about 11 months. So my goal was to be out within a year, and I think it was 11 months that I gave notice. And it allowed me to pay the bills and stuff, but then also gave me some flexibility work on my coaching, and I still had plenty of time. So, you don't need 80 hours a week to build a coaching business if you're productive and disciplined. A lot of people say, oh, yeah, I work 100 hours a week. Well, if you were watching them with a notepad, following them around their whole day, are they working that many hours? Probably
they're running
not.
to the kitchen getting water.
Yeah,
so,
playing Angry Birds or Candy Crush or screwing around on YouTube and stuff. They're not actually working. So I say you could build a successful coaching business part-time with full-time commitment.
Brilliant. So, Marc, you said you had some coaches as you were going down this path. Tell me about a particular time where a coach gave you this really good piece of advice, and for whatever crazy reason, you did not want to believe it, and you fought the coach on, no, this doesn't make sense. Did you have one of those moments where you finally had to struggle through that inertia? Because oftentimes coaches tell you things that are important, but inside it's like, but you don't understand. Did you have one of those moments?
I had a pre-moment, I'll say. So when my coaching business was flying high, everything was going great. This was probably roughly 2006-ish. I didn't even know coaches were. A coach came into my local real estate office, and he wanted me to work with him. He wanted me to hire him. And I didn't say this, but in my mind, I'm thinking, like, look at what I built. Do I look like I need a coach? I got this covered. My business closed several years later, and I thought, wow, I really wish I would have listened to him a little more. Maybe things wouldn't have closed or wouldn't have been as messy with the closure. So I always remember that story, and that's why I think my coaching business has done well, because I learned my lesson. It was a very $1 million mistake or lesson I learned, but I think it was valuable to learn it.
What's interesting is sometimes the coach doesn't even have to have expertise in your space. Just by inquiring through questions, people get their own epiphanies and go, oh, holy crap, I never thought of that.
Yeah, exactly. So the question gets asked, all the time in my Facebook group is, do you have to have done what you're now coaching on, right? And I always use the analogy with some of the best baseball managers weren't very good players. You look at Joe Torre, he was okay, but he did very well with the Yankees managing years later. So same thing, Tiger Woods has different coaches and stuff. They maybe couldn't drive a ball past 100 yards, but they at least know what they're doing. And I think that makes a really good point. You don't need to have that. Yeah.
And the flip side of the coin is you could get somebody like Tiger Woods who may actually be a brilliant coach, but there's a really good chance he might not be.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, look at Wayne Gretzky. I mean, not to knock him, that I'll get booted out of Canada for criticizing Wayne Gretzky. Gretzky was the best hockey player of all time. I think most people would agree with that. His post career hasn't been great, with Phoenix and other things when he tried different coaching and management. Same thing with Michael Jordan, with basketball. So it doesn't always translate that the best players become the best coaches or managers afterwards.
So you have this colossal Facebook group. How many people in it?
We just passed 20,000 a couple days ago. So I think we're at 20,100 and some right now. Yeah.
So that's probably a really good pool of potential clients for you.
It is. Yeah. That's where most of my clients and customers probably come from. The big 3 pillars I say for my business, the Facebook group, there's the podcasting. So there's my show, but also going out on shows like this, what we're doing now. And then the third is daily emails. I've been sending daily emails to my list since 2016. So that's where most of my clients are coming from, one of those 3 buckets.
Brilliant. So how do you grow a Facebook group? Because you're building community, and in the past, Facebook groups were nice, but since COVID, they've become essential, right? People are longing for that connection. So how did you nurture that group? How do you feed it? How often do you touch it?
That's a tough question to answer quickly. I have a program around it, so I talk for hours about it. But I mean, a few things I would say is if you're not active in your group, then why should anyone else be? So I show up every single day. I've never missed a day. I also encourage people to engage. So, for example, someone asks a question, I'm like, man, Umar would be great for this. I'll tag you in, right, to bring you into the conversation. A lot of group owners don't do that because they say, well, gee, I don't want to lose any potential clients by bringing in someone else. I view it more collaboration than competition. So I think that's where the group's done well, is I've been very open that way. Yeah.
So let's talk about that mindset. That mindset of it's my potential client. I've got to hold on to them. I can't introduce them to anybody else. So tell me about somebody that I'm sure somebody you coached had that. How did you coax them out of that kind of limited thinking to, hey, this 7 some odd billion people on the planet, you got plenty of customers. And so tell me about one of those.
Well, I've used that example before. For almost 8 billion people on the planet, you need very few of those 8 billion, say 10, or maybe even fewer if you're charging more out of 8 billion to build a successful coaching business or any other business in a lot of cases. So I've had people, for example, who clients of mine who are launching podcasts that are like, well, I'd like to do an interview-based one, but I don't want to bring competitors on there. And people said that to me too when I launched Natural Born Coach, like, oh, Marc, you're giving a platform to your competition. I'm like, this isn't Coke, Pepsi type thing, It improves the quality of my show or my Facebook group when I bring good people on there. So I've had to run into that, not with every single client, but it's certainly happened quite a bit where people are just being a little too tight with, they want to pee on the customer and put their scent on them and no one else can talk to them or the prospect. And it's not a good way to look at it. It's a very lack or limited way of thinking. I prefer to think more abundantly.
And I think oftentimes, if you're introducing people to great resources, if they decide to go a different direction than you, there's an element of, man, if you would have gotten them as a client, they may not have been a good client to begin with in the first place.
Yeah, I'm not everyone's cup of tea, so I can't work with 20,000 people, even if I want to. Some people, maybe they hate Canadians. They don't like my sense of humor. I have a weird, dry sense.
You have a sense of humor?
I do. Go figure. Yeah.
So what's kind of interesting is I married a Yank and moved to the States in 91. And it took me a while to stop drinking tea and be a coffee drinker. The shocking part was one day out of my mouth, this came out. It was the letter Z. In Canada, of course, we say Z.
Yeah, that's right. It's funny. I'm very Americanized because most of my clients are in the States, 90-some%. So I say things like niche as opposed to niche. A lot of Canadians, we're so fancy saying niche or whatever. I'm niche. It's all potato, but yeah.
It is. So tell me about what is the difference between Canadians and Americans as you're coaching them? Do you find like there's a difference between your Canadian clients and American clients?
Yeah, that's a great question. I find, what Canadians are like, because you're from here, we're a little more perhaps reserved or hesitant to promote. So me, I think I was born in the wrong country. I love America's entrepreneurial spirit. I love that whole American dream. I love promotion. And a lot of people for Canada, I know, think that, oh, well, I can't talk about a client result or can't post a testimonial or I'm going to sound like Donald Trump on his Twitter feed, or stuff like that. They're going to think you're promoting too much and I have to get them to blow their own horn. Now, that's a generalization because, a lot of people think, oh, Canadians are so polite and all this and Americans are rude and crass. There are plenty of rude, idiotic Canadians and plenty of lovely Americans and stuff too. So I don't buy into all that. But I do think with Canadian clients, I found this in the UK too, actually, that when I've had UK clients like, well, I can't promote like that. Like they're holding back a bit compared to the States. And
Step up a lip, old chap.
Be more American. There's a reason why America's a world leader and done so much with business and inventions, everything else is because it has that drive. So I don't think it's a bad thing to say, be more American.
Yeah. When I was in Canada, what I noticed was that it took longer to close deals in Canada. And sometimes the deal was never going to close, but they were too polite to tell you. And
Yeah.
in America, it was like, yes, no, or get the
Yeah,
hell out of here.
exactly. Yeah. Well, I
And
would much rather have a quick no than a maybe. Like, it's
yeah,
frustrating to
absolutely.
have a maybe and you're chasing for 6 months following up. I can appreciate someone that's, hey, look, thanks, Mark, for the offer, but it's not for me. And this is why. Have a great, move on. Okay, that's great.
Brilliant.
I would
So
prefer
here's a joke. Mark, do you know the difference between Canadians and Americans? Let me tell you. When you
that.
ask an American, who are you? They say, I'm an American. When you ask Canadians, who are you? They go, we're not Americans. That's our national identity. We're not them.
It is
So
frustrating online because you hear the joke, "Oh, we feel like we're the apartment above the meth lab," or whatever. And I'm like, God, I do think a lot of Americans are too rough on their country. I'm like, man, you guys have a great country. Be proud of it.
actually, what's kind of interesting is there's a disconnect between the government and its policies and the people. I was listening to this interview. It was a 60 Minutes interview, and they had this person had gone to Iran. And when they came back, the host had asked them, like, don't they hate us over there? He says, no, I went there. Everyone's like, oh my God, it's so nice to see an American again. And people are just like us. All they want is a better future for their kids, 3 squares a day, and justice.
Yeah,
Give people that, and nobody goes to the streets with pitchforks.
yeah, exactly. And I there was a joke I heard speaking out of a Canadian asks what was Titanic about, and the American says, yeah, it was about instead of what was in Titanic about, the movie Titanic
Yeah.
about boat and all that. So
Yeah. So you're working with coaches, and you probably say some crazy stuff, Mark, like you're not charging enough. And the person goes, I could never do that. So take me through the relationship of money and human beings. How do you get people to really realize their value? And then more importantly, feel comfortable talking about it?
there are a lot of not just coaches. I think this is humans in general, but
Oh,
coaches
yeah, absolutely.
have some weird feelings around money, and you could just tell. So, for example, back in 2015, I hosted a summit to help coaches increase their fees. Just exactly what we're talking about.
Root,
Yes, the summit
you
was called
hoser.
the Command Hire Coaching Fee Summit. Very original title. But I did have coaches in various communities and things where I was promoting it were saying things like, well, that's not right. Coaching isn't about charging, making a lot of money. It's about serving people. And there was this discussion in my Facebook group yesterday, and everyone's painting me like, oh, geez, he's like worse than Gordon Gekko, J.R. Ewing, and Hitler combined or something. I find there are a lot of what I call Mother Teresa coaches, and they think you can't be charging or charge very little. You got to be coaching barefoot in a village somewhere far off and serving the people. And it's just a bad way to look about it. Man, we're saying about a lot in this interview. It must be because you mentioned it.
I jinxed you, yeah.
You did. So I always say the toughest person to convince for charging more isn't anyone out there. It's the man or the woman in the mirror. If you're convinced that you're worth every penny of whatever you're charging, $5,000, $10,000, whatever, the rest are, I won't say a breeze, but it's certainly a lot easier. If you're hesitating and you get into that part of the conversation with the prospect, well, how much? What does it look like to work together? How much is it? And you hesitate just a little bit, they'll pick up on that.
Well, absolutely.
The energy of it. Yeah.
So just going back to your Mother Teresa comment, people have an illusion of what other people are like. She was a badass woman. So she would take money from like criminals. And then people would say, how can you take money from these thugs to feed the poor? And she said, money's money. And if this is going to do good, we're going to do good. And she was never shy about saying, hey, give me the money. And what's kind of interesting is I do this exercise sometimes with groups. It's like, I'm going to suggest your annual income. We're going to start low at $10,000 a year, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100, 200, 300, 500, a million, 5 million, 10 million,
Yeah.
10 million. And I ask people to pay attention what it feels like and what thoughts come up. And when the numbers are lower, oftentimes people get this reaction of, not me. Some people get angry. When I get to kind of what they're earning right now, they say, well, it felt okay. What was it like when I went beyond what you earned? It felt exciting. What was it like when I went way beyond that? Then it's like, it was terrifying. I was thinking, I'll be working all the time. My kid's going to turn to drugs. And it's all that hang up around money dictates how we show up. And even if we go, that'll be $10,000, it comes from the beliefs around money, deeply lodged within us.
Yeah, every person has that internal thermostat, right? That
Absolutely.
certainly isn't a unique thought. Other people have talked about it. I've seen coaches, for example. There was a guest on my show a few years back who struggled with poverty as a kid growing up. Her family was always getting the power shut off. They didn't have money for groceries. They had to depend on the kindness of others. Now she's a successful coach. She's making multi six figures, even though she's doing that, making good money compared to the average person out there. She still has that fear, like she's paying her power bill, instantly when it comes in, and she's always looking over her shoulder. And she said it's because her thermostat was set so low for many years, and she struggled. And I think it's like an iceberg. There's underneath the water. You don't see it necessarily, but it's there.
And so it kind of brings me to a thought that, at least Umar's worldview, people have an image they show the outside world. And the image sometimes is, look at me, I'm pretty or smart or amazing. Or it could be a look at me, I'm broken, I'm worthless. But that is an illusion. Then they have something that I call the delusion, who they think they are. And then there's the actual person deep inside. You kind of thoughts on that, and how do you kind of bring that to your coaching conversations with coaches? Because the most successful coaches, at least this is my illusion, are the ones that are authentically powerful in who they are.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny you say authentic, because I agree with that. I do find that coaches mess up the authenticity thing. Sometimes they go a little too far. And this goes into what you mentioned with people seeing themselves as a victim. So there's some coaches I've seen online that I'm all for keeping it real, being open, being interesting and stuff like that. They're a little too far. So I saw one, for example, had a very public, messy divorce with her husband or ex-husband. Every day she was posting scanned images of the paperwork. She was talking about how he had cheated on her. He gave her an STD. She's burning his clothes, all this other stuff. Now, she's getting a ton of engagement because it was like people craning their necks with a car accident or watching a dumpster fire. But was it helping her business? No, I don't think. Or the other one I see is a coach a few years back. She apparently helped people reach 7 figures in her business. She literally shared a screenshot one day of her bank account. It was like $18.42. And I'm like, geez. And she tried to turn into, you know what, I've been down before and I'll make it back. I'm a badass, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, she got a lot of you go girl, got a lot of engagement, but is anyone going to be whipping out their wallet to hire someone? Like, they don't, that's it, more pity, but it doesn't mean it's going to grow her business. So I'm all for being authentic, but also don't use pity as or victim.
Absolutely. And I think going back to the example of the gal that was getting divorced, had she come and said, look, I'm going through this divorce and I'm doubting myself and I'm scared as hell, but I'm going to get over it. Like that kind of authenticism, I made that word up, by the way, allows, it connects with the humanity in other people. But when it's like all that fear and anger and resentment, it detracts. And I think there's something to be said for speaking the truth, where I've seen people, like I was at a wedding, before COVID, and the priest that came up said, somebody else was supposed to do this. They couldn't. So I'm doing this wedding. And I just want you to know that I just graduated from seminary school a month ago, and this is my first wedding. And 300 people in the audience were like
clapping. Yep.
All right. And he just connected with the audience because it was, hey, this is new for me. And he did a phenomenal job. And had he not done it, just kept it secret, in some way, I think he would have robbed power from himself.
Yeah.
Having that doubt, when you reveal, hey, by the way, Marc, I have no money right now, but I want to talk to you. And it's like, okay, the pressure's off.
Yeah.
And then we have an authentic thing. But if I keep up a facade, oh, yeah, my business is going fantastic, Marc. I got clients coming out of the woodwork, and then I do no one any good. And there's a really good chance that you might pick up that what he's saying and what I'm picking up, there's a disconnect there. I'm not sure what it is. You may not be able to divine it. But as soon as you get that disconnect, it creates distrust.
Well, with the wedding, he did something smart because he brought the crowd. The attendees are on his side. They're rooting for him finally, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I like it. Now, that's a little different than if he said, I've been up all night, I had explosive diarrhea, and my wife cheated on me, and she served me divorce papers. Like, oh, okay, maybe his head's not going to be in it, but I like what he did there. Yeah.
Brilliant. So, Marc, my worldview is that earlier on, we have big things that we need to overcome that are glaring us in the face. That might be scary as hell, and we get a coach or we do it ourselves and we overcome them. But as we progress in our careers and our happiness, those blocks become more subtle. So, A, how do you find your blocks? And could you share a recent one where it's like, oh, I noticed da da da, and this is what I'm doing to overcome it?
Good question. I mean, one way for identifying blocks for me is journaling. I'm a big journaler. I've been doing it
Nice.
for years. I miss very few days. Sometimes when I just start writing, something comes out. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. And I look at it. I'm like, yeah, that's something where it's a block. So perfect example, being authentic, because we're being authentic. I found with social media a few years back, everyone's it looks like they have the perfect life, right? They're every day they're
Absolutely. The Facebook
making a
life.
million making $1 million a day, and they have the perfect wife or husband, and just everything's going swimmingly well. And this isn't something that I would like when I would see posts come up where I'd be breaking stuff and or whatever. But I had a little bit of something with some people. I'm like, oh God, look at this braggart again, or like, oh yeah, right, he's full of it. I know he didn't make $122,000 this week for whatever. That was a not good for me, because anything that you resent, you're going to chase away, and that's not helping me bring in more money. At the time, I was single too. I'm with a great girl now. We've been together for a year. Love each other very much.
And you're moving.
Yeah, I'm moving for love. Yeah, right now in the process of it. So she's good enough.
Moving in together or closer?
Together. Yeah, together. We basically
Nice.
been living together for the
I
last year.
noticed some sweat break out on your forehead.
Yeah, I'm
Just kidding.
gonna propose to her here on your show. I have the ring. No.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah. So, but at the time I was single. I had times, I forget what this was, probably 2 years into my business, maybe 3, that I saw these posts, and my business wasn't where I wanted it to be. And I'm like, that was me projecting and feeling that. So I ended up saying, no, this isn't cool. So the practice I use to change it around, and I do this almost every single day. If someone shares a win on social media, like a Facebook friend, something like that, or if I'm on their email list, I'll often send a message back to them. Hey, Umar, I noticed that you just got named as one of Baltimore's top coaches in whatever magazine. That's really cool. Congrats. I just wanted to say, and it's something like that. And then the people get back to me, and it forms a good friendship. So I'm like, okay, this person isn't an asshole, or she's not the B word. They're actually very nice, right? And I feel better about it too. So I recommend not letting the green-eyed monster out of the cave like that, but flip it around and bless people that are doing that.
Absolutely.
Same goes for paying bills, by the way. And I'm not the first person to suggest this, but whenever I pay bills, I don't look at it, oh God, I got to pay, a couple $100 for the power bill now, grumble, grumble, grumble. I'm like looking at it as a good thing. Hey, I'm doing well enough that I could pay this quickly. And, if I'm paying a bill, let's say you're providing a service to me, Umar did a great job. This is going to help him, with his life and with his bills and stuff. And I'm looking at that as a good thing. And I think that's a better way to handle it.
Absolutely. And Marc, thank you so much for being on the program. And we're going to put all your links on the show notes. But why don't you kind of share one last piece of wisdom and any connection things verbally, so if someone's listening to this, they still get the information.
Well, I'll share some wisdom, because this is what I was doing just before.
Don't come on Umar's show. Other than that, what are you sharing?
So I've been procrastinating, putting off redoing. I launched a program a few years ago for Facebook groups, and it's getting a little bit stale, right? A lot's changed in Facebook a few years. My group's a lot bigger. However, I could not get this darn program updated because there's always something else on the front burner. I woke up this morning, I said, I'm just going to get going with the new videos for it. And I just spent a couple hours before I hopped on here doing it. The wisdom from that is, don't overthink things. Don't feel like you have to have a script. Everything worked out. I literally just hopped on, bang, record a video. It's in the can. Record now. I'll have to do quick edits and stuff, of course, to do that. But I feel much better like coming on here. If I was still pushing off, it would be in the back of my mind. So I share that because that was something happening today. Don't overthink things. You'll feel much better taking action instead of stewing and ruminating and thinking about stuff.
And so how can people get a hold of you?
Well, the Facebook group, which we talked about, that's thecoachingjungle.com. A lot going in there, so we'd love to see people. My podcast,
I'm going to join myself.
Good, yeah, come on over, swing on in. My podcast is called Natural Born Coaches. I've released about 700 episodes on almost any topic imaginable for coaches. That's at naturalborncoaches.com. And I have a hard copy print newsletter for coaches called Secret Coach Club, and that's at secretcoachclub.com.
Superb. And dear listeners, I believe in the power of sucking. So frickin' execute. You can always make it better, but if you wait for perfection, it's never going to happen. Marc, it was a joy having you on the show. Thank you so much for taking time out.
Thanks for the invite.
If you enjoyed this episode, please go to iTunes and leave a 5-star rating. And if you're looking for more tools, go to my website at nolimitselling.com. I've got a free mind training course there that's going to teach you some insights from the world of neuro-linguistic programming, and that is the fastest way to get better results.